Hello everyone, and welcome to our update this afternoon on AI, tech, data and social media law. My name is Peter Wright. I'm the Managing Director and Solicitor at Digital Law, and this afternoon we wanted to give you a very quick run through on some of the key things affecting the world of law, technology and how that applies to the running of a business both in the UK and potentially for overseas businesses looking to work in the UK at the moment as we come into the where we are now in the last quarter of 2024. I'm joined by my colleague Amelia, who is going to be doing the magic next slide please task that we got so used to a few years ago when we started doing these things in COVID, of course. So I just asked Amelia just to go to next slide please on there. So Digital Law is a firm that focuses on the law related to technology and its use when it comes to digital technology, hence the name Digital Law. It does what it says on the tin. We do a lot of work helping and advising clients when it comes to doing business, when it comes to the sale and supply of goods and highly regulated services using digital technology. So this includes the things you can imagine like websites, portals, mobile apps. Increasingly, it also applies to the use of artificial intelligence, smart devices, mobile devices, and their use and application when it comes to the collection, use, storage, transmission and use of personal data. So as you can imagine, we do a lot of work helping our clients when it comes to data protection, international data transfers, cybersecurity and privacy. And we've been sort of hopefully spreading the news about all these things with our clients and also doing a lot of work with the academia, working with the European Law Students Association and working with others to work with the next generation of lawyers who will be advising on these sorts of topics in the future. Next slide, please, Amelia. I'm also co-author of the Law Society Cybersecurity Toolkit, the second edition of which is available now. This has been updated with all of the wonderful things we picked up during the pandemic experience of working from home and the greater level of risks when you're working from home, when you are working in places outside of the office, when it could be in hotels, cafes, etc. Things to think about when it comes to privacy, when it comes to the security of the data that you're working on, and also even thinking about the physical environment you might be working in, how you could be overlooked, how your data could be at risk. So all of the things in that toolkit have been updated. It contains things like forms, templates and checklists to help you in your organization. It's designed for law firms, but also has a lot of use in other highly regulated sectors. So you can start demonstrating compliance and doing the best that you can when it comes to identifying and managing risks around cybersecurity and the storage, transmission and use of all of the confidential and very often commercially sensitive data that we're collecting on a daily basis in business. Next slide, please, Amelia. So today is just a very quick, short update on things that I wanted to make sure that people were aware of that are happening, because there's so much happening right now when it comes to the use and adoption of generative AI at light speed across the economy. Loads of different organisations are embracing the use of AI and the efficiencies that it offers. But what we wanted to do is just highlight a few of the things to think about before signing on the bottom line on any contracts that you may suddenly find yourself presented with when it comes to working with suppliers who are offering great AI services that may present great savings to an organisation, but also we want to just make sure that people are aware of just a few of the risks to think about, as well as also considering how they can be used from a fraud perspective increasingly. I also wanted to just provide a quick update with regards to TikTok, the savior when it comes to marketing for so many organizations, but that is a tool that might not be around for that much longer in certain territories. So we'll be looking at that as well. I also wanted to just look quickly at a few issues around data protection law, a few things happening in the UK with the change of government, and also cybersecurity regulation, things evolving there as well. This is all just a quick update. I will be providing more information at the end of the webinar on more detailed training that we have available in 2025 for those that are interested. As always, this webinar is produced by Anson Evaluate. If you would like to have your own webinars produced, if you're interested in things like podcasts, if you're looking at getting that content out there through social media, we can highly recommend our colleagues at Anson Evaluate. That's at www.ansonevaluate.com, and again, more information will be provided in the follow-up to this webinar. Next slide, please. So there we go. I couldn't help myself. We're going to talk about artificial intelligence. I went to see 2001: A Space Odyssey, reissued back at the cinema. And of course, you have to see a movie from 1968 to see actually the idea of AI and the problems it can cause brought to life on the screen, in the shape of HAL 9000, the murderous, though we eventually find out, not through his own fault, computer from the Discovery spaceship. For those that haven't seen it, I still find it incredible to see a movie from 1968 that foresees the use of things like smartphones, tablets, video conference calls, and imagining them almost in perfect clarity in 1968, and then that's kind of how we're living now. Truly incredible foresight from Arthur C. Clarke and Stanley Kubrick. But the point is, AI is now being used in our homes, in our workplaces. We have the EU AI Act, but that is not that does not apply in the UK. Interestingly, I heard a statement from Lord Mandelson, who is working as an advisor and has the ear of the Prime Minister Sir Keir Starmer. He's in the running to be the next British ambassador to the United States, and he's made it quite clear that in his view the UK will not be following the path set out by the European Union in the AI Act. Interestingly, he was saying we're outside of the European Union, so what is the benefit for the UK of following the approach followed in that AI Act when actually we can do something different in the UK? And that seems to be the direction of travel that at the moment the government is thinking about, albeit we haven't got much in the way of public pronouncements on this. But when Lord Mandelson turned around and said that on the public forum of Times Radio, I thought it was quite illuminating. At the moment, we continue to have the guidance in place from the UK Information Commissioner. Jonathan Edwards spoke at the conference that he organised a couple of months back. We watched that in full so that you don't have to. And it was interesting how he was saying, in his view, the existing framework set out by the UK Data Protection Act, UK GDPR, very much should apply to the use and application of artificial intelligence. So in effect, he's saying that the same level of due diligence should apply when you are looking to use products incorporating AI, and there's a lot of products out there using AI. Don't necessarily think, oh, it's only if we use a chatbot that we're using AI. There are so many applications out there now, from things like Grammarly through to smart speakers, through to the other grammar and spell checkers that are out there, through to a lot of the sort of things when it comes to sales and marketing now that are taking a lot of the pain and administration out of large scale campaigns that have to be run. When it comes to sending out loads of bespoke emails and things, that can now be done through AI. It's not the pain of someone having to sit there and write it. The point is that these systems are still artificial intelligence. They're still collecting and using and processing personal data, and the same laws therefore continue to apply. So think, where are the servers located? What security and encryption is in place? If data is being transmitted, how is that used at rest? How is it being used elsewhere? It is a matter of thinking quite carefully about ensuring the same levels of security apply to anything you're using that has artificial intelligence as you would apply to any other system that you use. So make sure you have due diligence criteria in place for any third-party processing system that you're going to be using, and in particular apply it to AI. You may even want to have some nice, clear AI guidelines in place that apply not just to AI procurement for your organization, but then apply to its use. We've just finished working with one of our clients on introducing a large, comprehensive set of AI guidelines that will be used in all of their territories, including the UK and in across the European Union. And they have introduced these so that they can be ahead of the game in saying, these are the criteria that we will have in place. These are guidelines written to be understandable and approachable, so anyone using AI can open up these guidelines and think, how should I be using these? What can I use these for? What's it fine to use it for? What's it not fine to use it for? Example being that, for example, you could use some AI is now being used quite a bit when it comes to coding. So it could be fine to embrace and use AI for that, because there's simply no personal data going to be involved or anything that's commercial or confidential. But it can be an absolute godsend for coders and those building platforms and applications to be able to embrace AI and move a lot more speedily at designing, building and producing products and services than may previously have been the case. So it's sometimes good to be able to almost unchain the people in that part of the business to say, look, you can use these tools, go and run with them, embrace them and use them, because the commercial risk in terms of things like data protection and security can be dialed back because they might not be using personal data. But you want them to know about the issues that they should then consider if they're building something that will be storing or using personal data. So there's a lot to consider, a lot to take account of, and a lot to think about when it comes to actually putting some guidelines in place that can then grow and evolve as the technology evolves, as the business evolves over time. But thinking about this now and having these in place so you can consider how this technology will be used in your organization and how you're going to procure it and how you're going to use it can save you a lot of trouble and aggravation further down the line. Next slide, please, Amelia. So that's a little bit on AI products. But what I also just wanted to make sure everyone was aware of is that AI can also be used, unfortunately, for somewhat more nefarious purposes. The reason why AI is suddenly being used in loads of different products, from Salesforce to Microsoft, all these things, is because it's becoming more easily available, more easy to understand. People can be trained on it more easily. It can be incorporated more easily. It's cheaper to develop, cheaper to use. And if it's like that for mass commercial use, unfortunately, guess what? It's also easier for the scammers and fraudsters to use. Now, when it's come to threats online, cybersecurity threats, cyber attacks in recent years, very often those have been automated. You've seen automated attacks being run from various parts of the world, various organized crime gangs, sometimes various nation states, firing these things across, and then they're being defended by automated defense systems. You look at some of the great products that are out there, as well as some of the security levels that nation states have put in place, and an awful lot of that is automated. So it's bots fighting bots, robots fighting robots. In many ways, the world envisaged in Terminator is already here, but it's all virtual, it's online. Now, the point here is that a lot of the more sophisticated AI tools are now being used when it comes to perpetrating fraud. Some of you may have seen The Tinder Swindler, which was a documentary on Netflix. I think it was about 18 months ago now, 12 or 18 months ago. Highly encourage you to watch it. That showed how a fraudster was using Tinder to meet people, defrauding them, using the money to sustain his lifestyle, which allowed him to meet more people and then defraud them. Now, that was an individual doing that. He was able to stay one step ahead of all the authorities because he would just jump onto a plane that he'd hired and jump from jurisdiction to jurisdiction and stay ahead of law enforcement agencies that simply did not understand the fraud that he was perpetuating and did not have the resources to work collaboratively to bring him down. But that illustrated the power of these romance scams and actually how much money can, unfortunately, be made from people. Now, here we are in 2024, what's happening? There are automated bots out there that look like genuine individuals on these platforms. The Sunday Times ran a expose a couple of weeks back showing a story about a supposed US military service person who had been divorced. Very much a hard look story. There were pictures, there was video up on the romance apps, the dating apps, where you could engage with this person, and it turned out there were multiple profiles using video and footage of this person that looked genuine. And it also could be married up with other platforms, so you could go along to their Facebook profile, you could find them on Twitter. And it was very engaging. People would then engage, would send messages, and it would be, oh, something's happened, and oh, suddenly my dog's ill, and can you please send me some money so I can deal with the really expensive vet bills that I can't afford. And of course, people would, thinking that they were in a relationship, would send money. And this has happened to multiple people. Now, the area here of romance fraud, you might think, well, so what? It's on dating apps. Well, funny enough, one of our first clients, and we've been trading for 10 years now, one of our first clients was actually someone in the United States who unfortunately had fallen victim to this and was regularly messaging someone that they thought they were in a long-term relationship with. And it turned out that they thought that, this person, again, you get the whole, oh, I need money. This person thought they were in love. They sent thousands of dollars. They thought that they were helping this person with their oil business. Turned out they were not, but they thought they were getting stocks and shares. And when we looked at the certificates, of course, they were not genuine. We also then employed a private investigator who found out that the addresses quoted were not genuine, and that the location that the fraudster said that they were in was not in the Far East, as they had said. They were actually located in Oldham, in the north of the UK. So it just goes to show sometimes that things cannot be what they seem. But the point here is that that was a very successful fraud from that fraudster's perspective. And now you don't even have to put the hours in person. You can get automated bots to do it for you. That is very much the problem. So unfortunately, we have to be careful. We also have to bear in mind this technology can be used in dating fraud. It can also be used in real life fraud. The supposed transaction, the supposed client that you may have had get in touch with you, what looks like a perfectly legitimate business engagement could in fact be an attempt by fraudsters to find out information about your organization to allow them to perpetuate a fraud. It could be to try and get hold of personal data. It could be an attempt to try and elicit confidential or commercially sensitive data. It could be just a way to earn your trust before then sending different links to you that you then click on that grant them access to your laptop, your mobile devices, and wider systems across your business. So therefore, it remains always key to consider who is it that you think you're speaking to online. It could be perfectly legitimate looking video that you think you're speaking to someone on a video conference and it isn't actually genuine. Photographs might not be genuine. Therefore, it means checking multiple IDs, ideally meeting people in person and in public for that, just for reasons of personal safety. Verifying people on multiple social networks, multiple accounts, and hopefully being able to verify multiple independent ID of government issues. So, for example, passports, driving licenses, etc. I don't think it's any coincidence that, interestingly, this week, apparently the use of dating apps is on the decline. And there might be various social reasons for that, but I can't help but think that people are starting to find that they can't necessarily trust the veracity of some of the profiles that they're finding on these dating apps. Not only do you sometimes find you might end up meeting someone who's been putting on a show and putting on a front, and that isn't the real person, but it can indeed, it's such a common vehicle for the fraud of the type covered in the Tinder swindler and which is now being perpetuated by AI. So isn't it better to actually just go meet someone in real life? Who knows? Anyway, moving on from there. Next slide, please, Amelia. Okay, so we should be moving on from there to, oh, we've gone to the end. Slide before that. So we've got AI-powered fraud. Next one, which I think should be TikTok. Yes, there we go. So TikTok. I keep banging on about this to virtually anyone that I meet at the moment, that TikTok could quite easily disappear come January of 2025. Why is that? There is currently well, it was a bill, but this was signed into law by President Biden in April of 2024. It's one of these massive bills containing loads of different pieces of legislation. It was all about sort of foreign aid and support, so there was loads of stuff in there. It was one of these sort of bring out your dead, and loads of things were thrown into it, including provisions banning TikTok, and then it passed Congress in April of last year. When it was passed, that bill gave TikTok 9 months to divest its US operations. One of the perceived concerns is that TikTok is owned by a company called ByteDance with its headquarters of the corporation in Beijing. They've always been concerned that, oh, Beijing, under the security laws in China, could ask to see data and information gathered by TikTok. The Chinese government's always said, no, 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 we would never do that. But there has always been this concern that data being collected by TikTok could be used for nefarious purposes. TikTok collects a lot of data. Its app, like a lot of social media apps, collects huge amounts of information from your mobile device. So it's looking at what things you like to watch on TikTok. For those that don't have a TikTok account, it's basically like TV on steroids. It serves you, there's a huge amount of content on there. It works out very quickly what content you want to see and what you don't want to see, and will serve you more and more and more on an infinite scroll. And it will not ever stop until you actually then switch your device off, close it, and put it away. People very often find themselves spending hours on TikTok. It is so powerful and indeed so addictive, feeding the dopamine receptors that social media has always fed on, encouraging you just to want to watch and watch and watch more and more. Now, because of these sort of concerns around its use, what it's doing to young people, and the fact that the data is being collected by China, the US has been persistently having an issue with regards to TikTok. President Trump, in the dying months of his first administration, did sign an executive order banning TikTok, but that ended up being cancelled. It couldn't be enforced properly, and I think they were also ended up being the US government was sued about that. But this is different. This isn't an executive order. This is legislation passed by Congress and then signed into law by President Biden. So the clock has been running since April. That 9 months runs out in January. It can be extended by another 3 months if TikTok is in the process of being divested. Apparently, there was a consortium of various individuals in the States who were looking at buying the US TikTok operations, which total something like 170 million social media accounts based in the United States. But TikTok has said, no, we cannot sell or divest part of TikTok to the US. The infrastructure will not allow it. It wasn't built to allow different parts of it to be hived off. Furthermore, TikTok, and interestingly, the Chinese government have said, we will not allow the TikTok algorithm, that powerful secret source that feeds you more and more of the content that people want on the infinite scroll. We will not allow that to fall into foreign hands. So valuable is it seen to be. Meta has a similar version to TikTok called Reels. It is not as successful. It doesn't have as much content. It doesn't have the usage numbers. And indeed, people that work on it have said, we can't match the algorithm that TikTok have. It's not, we aren't producing anything that is as good as what TikTok have. So where are we now? President Trump said during the election campaign, I will save TikTok. It's almost like he was saying things just to be elected, because of course this contradicted that previous executive order he'd signed during his first term as president. Where are we now? Well, Elon Musk is following President Trump around quite closely, inviting him to the launches of different SpaceX rockets, spending a lot of time with him at the White House. But the other tech tycoon who's now ingratiating himself is Mark Zuckerberg. Apparently he is back in favor with President Trump, despite having banned President Trump from Facebook in the aftermath of the 6th of January 2021 riots in Washington, DC. Now, let's think carefully. Why do we think Mark Zuckerberg would possibly be interested in ingratiating himself with President Trump? Banning TikTok would mean that the only other player in town is Reels. And that means that Meta can then hoover up users who can't access TikTok and take them all onto Reels, which isn't as good, but where are you going to go if you can't get the original thing that you want? So suddenly this seems quite likely that ban is going to come along in January. TikTok cannot divest itself or will not divest those US operations. Meta is thinking we can move in here. There is a precedent for what happens when TikTok is banned. It was banned in India many, many years ago, before the pandemic, back in, I think it was 2019. It was banned for various security and privacy reasons. The effect of that is just all of those Indian users who were on TikTok, their profiles are sort of faded out and they are not able to use the app. They can't share content. They can't go on there. They can't access anything. You know, the app is dead as far as they're concerned. And all they can do is use Reels, which they admit isn't as good. But again, If you can't access the other thing, you have to use the next best. I personally don't have a TikTok account. I speak to people that do put a lot of videos and have success on TikTok, and they say it is not straightforward to move your videos from TikTok across to Meta. They're branded, you know, a TikTok video has TikTok written on there. The other problem is that I think in terms of moving it across, the aspect ratio isn't necessarily the same. It's not the work of a moment to do. It can be done, but it's a bit of a pain. If you've got a large volume of TikTok videos, I would want to make sure that I've moved them across somewhere else so I can then edit them, change them, do whatever, and use them on other platforms. Otherwise, you might find they're going to be lost. Now, we're in the UK. Why am I worried about a ban in the US? There is precedent here for what happens when the US bans technology. Back in 2020, there was concern about the Chinese tech produced by the platform Huawei. They produce mobile phones. They provide a lot of base stations and transmitters for 4G and 5G communications. Their kit was seen as really good by the British government because you could use it for multiple different networks, and you could use it for 4G and 5G. Unfortunately, because of concerns raised in the US presidential administration, at one point CIA Director Mike Pompeo flew into London to force Boris Johnson to basically rip out Huawei from the UK's digital network. The UK wanted to press ahead with 5G rollout. It was an election pledge, but unfortunately Boris Johnson had to be dragged kicking and screaming to go back on that pledge and then rip out all this Huawei kit from the 3G, 4G and 5G network, which put the UK's super fast broadband rollout back. In fact, in some areas you went back from where 5G was, you went down to 4G or even 3G before new, more expensive kit could then be installed. The point I'm trying to make is that when the US has a concern with regards to security and privacy, which it does with regards to TikTok as an arm of the Chinese state, they tend to then sort of push other nation states, members of the Five Eyes network like the UK, NATO members like the UK, to then try and withdraw use of systems, networks that they've found could be problematic. So as a result, what ended up happening with Huawei could now happen with TikTok quite quickly. So if this ban comes in the United States, I would expect to see it following in the UK quite rapidly. And I think we would also see it across those other Five Eyes nation states, so Canada, New Zealand, Australia. And I think you could also find it in the big NATO countries and also in EU member states. When TikTok was originally, the security issues were flagged with it. Even though there's no smoking gun, there's nothing I can point to you and say this is the thing that's the problem. It's just these sort of general uneasy concerns that people seem to feel with regards to TikTok collecting this data and spiriting it off to China. But because of those concerns, there is seen to be when this was flagged originally, a lot of nation states, US, UK, and multiple EU members have said we will not allow TikTok to be installed on government-issued mobile devices. So you saw that ban happening across the EU. Even the European Commission ended up enforcing this across the institutions of the European Union, as well as then France, Germany, etc., all followed suit as well. So I think you would see a domino effect across the West, across NATO, across the Five Eyes, as TikTok would end up being made persona non grata in those countries as well. So as I say, if you're on TikTok, back up your data. Next slide, please, Amelia. So finally, what I wanted to look at was just to highlight some of the key bits of data and cyber regulation. We know, of course, that the UK has UK Data Protection Act 2018 and UK GDPR, which continues to apply. Just because the UK is not in the European Union, we transposed GDPR into UK law before the UK left. We also have full data adequacy between the European Union and the UK. That means that data of UK citizens can flow to the European Union under an adequacy decision made by the UK Information Commissioner. And the European Union said data of EU citizens can freely flow to the UK pursuant to a decision of the European Commission. So the point is that data can flow back and forth. That is subject to review, though. This isn't part of the UK Trade and Cooperation Agreement with the European Union, but it's kind of part of the wider package of measures that are in place to try and facilitate that level of easy data sharing, which pretty much continues at the moment to exist as it did before the UK left the European Union. However, those who are familiar with in particular entrepreneurs, those building businesses, those used to taking and payment processing, those who are building businesses where you have to have, for example, your customer services might be outsourced, your banking, etc., your HR being outsourced. Very often this can end up on servers, etc., that are outside of the European Union. If that is the case, if they're in the US, there is the EU-US privacy framework. This allows for the data of EU citizens to go to corporations that have signed up to the criteria of the EU-US privacy framework. So if you are using a provider, for example, Amazon Web Services, check and see that they are signatories to and continuing to abide by the terms of that framework. What's the point? Well, it means that if there is ever a problem, you can say to the regulator, the information commissioner, or if, for example, you're in banking or financial services, you can say to the Bank of England or the Financial Services Authority, look, we have done all we can. We checked that whoever it was providing our third-party servers, they were signed up to the privacy framework. What more could we have done? Well, what more could you have done, though? Because that framework is now, I think, the time of recording, it's at least the third type of framework we've had between the European Union and the US that covers the sharing of data, and they keep on being ruled as unconstitutional and having problems when it comes to the European Court of Justice, and indeed sometimes have been mumblings from certain judgments of the US Supreme Court that they aren't a particular fan of these sorts of frameworks either. How can you underpin it? I would have standard contractual clauses in place in any contract with any supplier. And then that also means you can have those standard contractual clauses in place. And it could be that the supplier is in the US, it could be that they're in the Middle East, it could be they're in Asia, wherever it is. If you've got those standard contractual clauses in, bang, again, you are able to say to a regulator, we've done all we can be expected to do. What other bits of legislation do we need to think about? We've got the Data Protection and Digital Information Bill. This was actually a creature of the last government. It was originally proposed in 2022. If you go to the UK government website now, it says it's in the House of Lords in committee stage, but it's been saying that for a while. It's not really receiving particularly positive support from the current government. It may just die in the House of Lords. Something may eventually emerge, but at the moment it's just stuck in that sort of sausage machine of committee stage and further consideration in the House of Lords. In the meantime, the new government in the UK, the Labour government, has introduced the Data Use and Access Bill 2024. This covers things like smart data, it refers to open banking, it's trying to encourage a certain level of data sharing and innovation in theory. And this is something that's receiving time. It was outlined in the King's speech, so it is part of the government's programme, and they will be pushing it through with legislative government time. So that's one thing to look out for, more than likely to follow in 2025. What do we have when it comes to cybersecurity laws we need to think of? The NIS Regulations 2018, when the UK was still part of the European Union's Network and Information Security Regulations were transposed into UK law. Therefore, when it comes to building networks, there are certain standards that have to be observed to try and ensure the integrity of networks and their systems. So those are one thing to look at. The Computer Misuse Act, when you're looking at a piece of legislation about this from 1990, it's not, of course, going to be referring to a lot of the tech that we use now, but it does establish a lot of the basic offences that cyber hackers and fraudsters would find themselves charged with if they try to act in a malicious way with regards to computers, with regards to networks and technology. So that's still pretty, the reason I refer to it is if you think in the wonderful world of law, we still refer to the Offences Against the Person Act 1861, which established some of the basic offences there. This is kind of the same thing when it comes to some of those more digital offences, and even though it's 1990, it has established good basic first principles which continue to apply. We have the Privacy and Electronic Communications Regulations. This is not just the cookie law. This is the thing that talks about security and privacy of regulations. It's one of communications, and it's one of the reasons why certain apps are not particularly great when it comes to using them for work-related communications. So think carefully before, for example, using WhatsApp or some of the other free communications apps that are out there for business-related activities. Always check and think, well, actually, does this comply with the requirements of PECA with regards to the privacy and electronic communications regulations? The Cybersecurity and Resilience Bill is a new piece of legislation. Again, this is something from the incoming government, part of their programme. This is, of course, pushing the existing agenda that the last few governments have had about trying to make the UK the safest place for businesses to do business online. We've got things like the UK National Cybersecurity Centre and various other initiatives, and this simply seeks to push forward a lot of those measures. We also have the Telecommunications Security Act 2021, which again hammers that same drum with regards to security of different communications, different methods. It tries to look at the fact that, of course, we communicate now using things like instant messaging and social media and video in a way that, of course, we didn't a few years ago. So it's trying to sort of catch up and close some of the loopholes there. We also have the UK Operational Resilience Framework. I just flag this up because it is mandatory for any firms regulated by the Bank of England, by the Prudential Regulation Authority or the Financial Conduct Authority. So I think it's pretty important for those operating in those sectors, or for organisations and entrepreneurs seeking to market services, apps and products that will be of use in those sectors, to ensure that they are taking account of them. And finally, reporting. Always consider, if you are in the process of reporting a major cyber attack, should you be speaking to the National Cybersecurity Centre? Should you be, for example, looking to feed it into the Cyber and Information Security Sharing Partnership, CIS, that's there as well. So when you do have a breach, important to have a plan, important to think about who you're going to report that to. Is it going to be the police, different law enforcement agencies? Will you have to tell your bank? Will you have to tell lenders? Will you be telling clients, your staff? Think carefully about this stuff before it happens, because you don't want to have to deal with it in the aftermath when you're struggling to process, the shock of what may have happened, losses that have been sustained, and you need to pick yourself up off the floor and in some cases act very, very quickly to meet some of the statutory reporting deadlines that are in place. So always think carefully about that. So next slide, please, Amelia. So we've come to the end of our quick run through that. If anyone's got any questions, there is the questions tab. I do have one question from one of the one of the people today who's just asked for the quote on Lord Mandelson there. That was quoted in the podcast that Lord Mandelson does with Danny Finkelstein and Hugo Rifkind on Times Radio, along with Polly Mackenzie. They do it each week. It's called How to Win the Election. And in the one 2 weeks ago, there was this discussion, because at the time they kept asking him, are you going to be the next ambassador to the United States? And that was one of the points that he came out with. So it's on one of those editions. And it was then also, because it was quite a significant point, it was then followed up by an article in the Times a few days later. What I will do, actually, Joanna, I will, if I can find the reference to that article in the Times, I will send the URL of that to you. I think we've got one other question that may have come up, so that's that one. You've also said, any specific AI guidance around cybersecurity for businesses and law firms? So yeah, there are certain things that, for example, law firms need to think about from a confidentiality and privacy perspective. One anecdote, for example, is I'm aware of one law firm that has been using a AI bot to record and transcribe the contents of all of the communications that take place on their fee earners' mobile devices. Once it is installed, it cannot be switched off. It does not comply with a lot of the criteria that I laid out earlier on around where's the data go, how secure is it, blah, blah, blah. It's not designed for the UK market, certainly not designed for the legal market. And one of our concerns was that, for example, it would listen to all conversations that a fee earner might have on a mobile device. So as well as work-related ones, it could be that, you know, if you're then calling someone to organise childcare, it'll listen to that as well. If the entirety of a call with a client is not all about, you know, it could be that there's some social aspects to it as well as legal advice. Do you want all of that recorded and transcribed and put on the file as well as the fact it, of course, is then inevitably being viewed by a third party, this app. So, you know, that kind of blows principles of confidentiality and first principles out of the water. So it is an example of what looks like a great time-saving app being introduced and used without really thinking through the consequences of it. So I think that typifies part of the problems and the difficulties at the moment for law firms. Just because a supplier has a nice logo and a snazzy website and says, look, we can save you all this time, doesn't necessarily mean that if you're operating in a highly regulated sector, that tool or device is really appropriate for your organization. So I think that highlights a few of those issues. So what we'll do is we'll share the recording of this to all of the attendees, and we'll also see for all those, because I think quite a few people wanted to come along to this event on LinkedIn and couldn't. We used LinkedIn to promote it, and guess what? We said register on this link, and a lot of people didn't. So I then direct messaged a load of people the link. As to how many people saw it or not, I don't know, but it could mean that in future we just share the link directly. Whether as many people will be able to access it or not, because it's not marked up as an event, I don't know. But this is all the fun of embracing marketing and development via social media. If anyone's got any other questions, please do feel free to drop me an email. It's peter.wright@digitallawuk.com. Can I have the next slide, please, Amelia? So we'll be doing 4 further webinars in January that take a lot of the themes that we have discussed today, where I've just really covered them sort of, 5 minutes on each one. I can do an hour on each of these very easily, and that's what I will be doing. So we'll look in more detail at the use of AI in different sectors, some of the rules and things that can be put in place. We'll look at some of the issues around fraud in AI. We will look at some of the issues around social media. We'll look more at TikTok. We'll look at some of the social media law points, and we'll look at some of those legal data and cyber points. A discount for anyone that is interested in any of those, £25 a throw, or if you want to do all 4, it'll be £75 for all 4. You can then book those in advance. We'll be able to then register you onto you'll be able to register on our system. We can send you all the updates and make sure that you're then notified when the events are about to start, and those will be delivered in the first quarter of 2025. If you are interested, drop us a line, let us know that you're intrigued, and we'll send you more information. Next slide, please, Amelia. On there as well, other things to be aware of. We do have a regular podcast, so if you've liked what you've heard today, find us on Spotify. We're also on Apple Podcasts, so just search Digital Law Podcast. You'll see our snazzy red logo come up. You can then register and you'll receive, if you subscribe, you'll then end up getting new episodes as they drop into your feed. We tend to record it every couple of weeks or so, activity levels permitting. When I say activity levels, there's always lots of content for us to discuss, everything from sort of regulatory breach of the week through to what's Elon Musk done now, through to different cyber incidents, data breaches, what's happening in terms of new laws coming through, etc. So always plenty of stuff that we're always updating. What's supposed to be a 15-minute podcast very often works out to being more like 50 minutes, but there you go, there's always a lot to cover. We also have a Patreon account, so we run extra, more detailed versions of the podcast and regular webinars for our Patreon members as well. If you are interested, then register with Patreon there. It's so much, I believe it's like a flat fee sort of per month on there. But please do, if you're interested, find us on Patreon. Next slide, please, Amelia. I think it's the last slide as well. There's our contact information. You can always take a quick screenshot of that. So there's my email address. As always, copy in anything you send to me. Always also do admin@digitallawuk.com, and that means that one of my colleagues will see it and will then make sure that something actually happens. You've got our direct number on there as well. You can like the post on You can follow us on LinkedIn and on Facebook. We're also on Twitter for those that still are. Yeah, you can also, as I say, engage on the podcast. But look, I hope that that's all been a useful update, and that's been useful for you on a Friday afternoon. Thank you so much for engaging and listening today. Hope that's been helpful. If you'd like more information about those other courses that we're running, please do let us know. Otherwise, thank you very much indeed for listening. Enjoy the rest of the day and have a great weekend. Thank you very much. Goodbye.